I would like to call the school board meeting for February 19th, 2019 for the Des Moines Public Schools to order. Please take the roll.
Mr. Barron.
Here.
Ms. Bradley. Ms. Langford.
Here.
Ms. Ellsburn.
Here.
Ms. Delagardelle Shelley.
Here.
Ms. Caldwell Johnson. Ms. Anderson.
Here.
The first item of business is approval of the agenda. May I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passes 6-0. Next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes for February 5th, 2019. May I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
Motion.
Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes 6-0. Before moving on, we don't have any district recognitions this evening, but I would like to take this opportunity to share a few words. Sadly, we have an empty chair at tonight's board meeting. Late Sunday afternoon, Thomas Harper, our Chief Financial Officer, passed away. In his position, Thomas also served as the secretary to the school board, and in that role, he not only sat here with us during our meetings, but worked closely with us throughout the year on a wide range of topics. Thomas joined DMPS nearly 8 years ago, moving here from Montana, where he held a similar position with the Billings School District. He came here at a critical time as we entered what has been an extended period of historically low growth in education funding by the state of Iowa. But thanks to both his sharp mind as well as his passion for education, Thomas did everything possible to make sure the financial challenges facing public schools had a minimal impact on our students. In fact, he did everything possible to find the means for us to do even more in support of our students until the very end. I know we all have heavy hearts at Des Moines Public Schools over the loss of our colleague, and I also know we all send our condolences to his family and friends. And with that, we will carry on with our meeting and with the business of governing and operating this school district for our students, families, and staff, as Thomas would expect us to do. The next item on our agenda is the consent items. We allow any person the opportunity to speak to the board for up to 5 minutes following the presentation of an agenda item. If anyone wishes to speak to an agenda item, please go to the information desk to sign up. Remarks must be germane to the agenda, and we ask that you avoid reference to personalities and character attacks, as those types of comments serve no productive purpose. We appreciate your input. As a reminder to the board and public, the board will not engage in discussion or deliberation with the speaker regarding comments made to agenda items. Discussion and deliberation will remain among board members at the board table with speakers' comments, informing said discussion, deliberation, and determinations as deemed necessary. Ms. Langford, do you have the motion?
I move that the board approve the consent items in accordance with the recommended action for each item on the consent agenda, including those previously authorized, certified, and approved for payment by the board secretary in the amount of $3,434,130.16, and procurement P-card transactions in the amount of $401,947.87.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Langford, second by Barron. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes 6-0. Next, we have a public hearing. The public hearing will come to order. Is there anyone wishing to speak to item E1, public hearing for rebid a parking lot replacement at McCombs Middle School? Hearing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Dr. Ahart, would you please introduce the matter?
I recommend the board review the proposed plans and specifications prepared by Angelo Architectural Associates for a parking lot replacement at McCombs Middle School, hold a public hearing, and approve the plans.
May I please have a motion and a second to approve the public hearing and the superintendent's recommendation? Second. Okay, and there is no presentation. Are there any questions or discussion? Please vote. Motion passes 6-0. Next item on our agenda is item F1, open enrollment, late applications for denial. Dr. Ahart, would you please introduce the matter?
Yes, on the agenda tonight, under F1, are those applications for open enrollment that were not timely and did not meet the special exceptions as articulated in state code.
May I please have a motion and a second to deny the open enrollment late applications listed for item F1?
So moved.
Is there any discussion or any questions? Please vote. Motion passes 6-0. Next item on our agenda is item F2, Males of Color, Part 1 update. This is a discussion item, and a final report for action comes later this year. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Ahart to introduce our presenters.
Yes, we have several presenters tonight, but leading the charge will be Jilmara Nova Mitchell, who is actually part of our team, but technically works for Heartland AA 11, but she is a leader of our equity work, and then Jake Troja, our Director of Climate Transformation. So Jake and Jilmara.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to get started here shortly. Thanks for the introductions. I'm Jake Troja, Director of School Climate Transformation for Des Moines. As you can see in the presentation, here we go. We have quite a few presenters today that we wanted to make sure we highlight the great work that's happening and give you some examples of the specific programs that we're working on here in the district regarding equity, but specifically regarding this report in the Males of Color. So as these folks come up to the podium, they'll introduce themselves as we go here. So here's our plan. We're just going to review the equity plan with you all here briefly to remind you of kind of the places that we're going and that we do have a plan that working on equity. We'll review some current action steps taken during the district this first semester so far, and we'll have a time for questions at the end. Okay, Jilmara.
So the first thing we'd like to do is to give you a moment to review our equity vision again. We feel it's important to always remember that and keep that at the forefront as we do our work. Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Move. Everything we do for equity at the MPS touches three areas: learning, thriving, and belonging. Learning is the knowledge, skills, and abilities we want the students to live with. Thriving is really the relationships that we like for them to engage with. And belonging is our partnership with community members, with the families we serve, and with the students, and elevating their voice into the work we're doing. We would like to give you a quick update on some of our equity teams and the work they have been doing to support the equity effort. It's very important for us to keep sustainability within the equity work, and I am very proud of the district for not having a specific office take on this work, but have that be the work of everybody who serves in Des Moines. So these teams I see as essential in creating sustainability and also spreading out the work and building the capacity of everybody to carry on the equity effort. The first committee that I would like to touch on is the Student Equity Advisory Council, and that is a team that meets with the superintendent and the associate superintendent 4 times a year. These students are remarkable. We have been really trying to elevate their voice into the equity work we're doing, and we get their input and feedback into every decision-making that we are making in the central office related to equity. They also get an opportunity to attend a course that was created to equip students with social research skills, and they are developing their action research projects, and they're going to provide us feedback on the equity work we have been doing in Des Moines at the end of this school year. They have been really engaged and excited with their own projects, and we hope that their suggestions will become part of our work. The Professional Learning Equity Team is a team that helps me plan and facilitate the leadership sessions that we have 6 times a year. And without the early outs next year, we won't have the large leadership sessions next year in the same format we have had. However, we don't want to dismantle that team because it's a team of committed teacher leaders, principals, assistant principals, equity coaches, and they have done remarkable work to support us. So We have talked to them and have decided to use their expertise and their passion to support and integrate equity into the teaching and learning sessions, the behavior sessions, the classified staff professional sessions. So we are really excited about this possibility of, instead of having a separate equity session for leaders, to integrate equity into every professional session that we lead in the district. And this team will be a key part of planning those sessions. The Community Partner Equity Team is a subgroup of our Community Partners team, and that is composed of 9 community partners, and they get to really get a in-depth understanding of the equity work we're doing and provide feedback, and I'm very thankful for their time and excited to have their input into the work we're doing. The Stakeholder Engagement Advisory Committee, and I apologize, it says equity on the slide, but it's engagement. That committee was a merging of the equity committee we have for the district and the SEAC committee and the School Improvement Advisory Committee. And that committee is composed by families, community members, and some internal staff. And they meet with Dr. A. Hart and Matt Smith 4 times a year to also get an update on data related to equity and our work, and also provide input as we move forward with the work we are doing. And then I have a new committee that I'd like for you to be aware of, that it's being formed by a teacher leader at Lincoln High School called Mr. Frank Lee. He is starting a Black Educators Coalition, which we are thrilled about. It's a teacher effort that it's not district-led. We are very excited to have him lead this effort. We will have the team meet with Dr. A. Hart and Matt Smith twice a year to create a feedback loop so that we can understand their experiences in the district and try to leverage their suggestions into the work we're doing for equity and inclusion, retention of staff of color. We are, though, very adamant that this is a teacher-led effort and should be so. So every educator who is of color is interested in participating will be invited, and they start meeting next week, which we are extremely excited about. This will be also open to leaders in the district, not only teachers, but classified staff, leaders, and principals, principal supervisors.
All right, and as we move into the updates on the programs, I just want to remind that last spring, we completed an equity analysis of absenteeism for the board. So we interviewed and got feedback from multiple stakeholders. As you can see on this slide, over 7,000 students provide their feedback. And if you recall, we identified these 3 major areas as the feedback came back to the committee. And from those 3 areas, we developed some action steps. And that's what we'd like to update you with tonight, is where are we at with these action steps. And so for tonight, we're going to focus in on these 3, the development and pilot of Project CRAVE, creation of attendance advisory committee, and the equity coaches, and highlight some of the work that they've been doing in the schools. So tonight we'll start with Project CRAVE and Sarah Doherty, the Director of Secondary Teaching and Learning.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Doherty. I'm the Director of Secondary Teaching and Learning. I'm going to share a little bit about Project CRAVE, which was designed directly in response to those student voices that Jake made mention to, and their responses in that survey about their educational experience being relevant both in instructional strategies and content. Through that survey, we also went into classrooms, specifically into our government classrooms with graduating seniors, to tap into their voice in a more authentic way. And what we found is these were the things that they were craving, and not just our students, but our teachers were craving to do with them. Building connections, emphasizing relevance, inspiring action, honoring viewpoints, and demanding equity both through the content and the instructional strategies they were exposed to. So we developed a set of inputs which focused on PLCs, self-selecting in the buildings, and deep work with curriculum coordinators to help create systems of co-generative dialogue where students and teachers were working together to design instruction and what their classroom experience would be like, to intentionally use culturally inclusive practices wrapped around content,
project-based learning, ongoing coaching and support from curriculum coordinators on a weekly basis, and regular monitoring collectively for the outcomes of that work. So you can see a couple of our teachers there. Yeah, thanks, Jake. So we were really intentional in our weekly monitoring of the outcomes from this work, not just waiting for lag data on test scores or semester grades. And so you can see here we were monitoring our commitment to meeting and coaching regularly with the teachers who are taking on this work, but also then what were we seeing, for instance, in this graph, what were we seeing in attendance and if that was having an impact on student attendance, the relevance and what they were feeling in their classrooms, helping them get to school. What we noticed is that there was low discrepancy. Students in these classrooms were attending, specifically males of color were attending at the same rate as all other students. And so that was something we could move off the conversation and get to what was apparently happening different, or their experience was different. So it allowed us to focus in on our coaching conversations. Thriving was maybe one of our most interesting data points. We adapted the tripod survey to find out what not only students were feeling as a result of this change in instruction, but we also asked teachers mirror questions, and then we're able to sit with teachers and look at those responses together and find out if their perceptions of what students were feeling matched with what they were saying. Some highlights in that data. The survey questions, students have a voice in what activities are a part of this class. Our males of color agreed at a greater rate than all other students. A question we have still about the data in yellow. Students have the opportunity to speak up and share their ideas about classwork with the teacher. Our male students of color responded at a lower rate than all students for that one. So that's a place for us to dig deeper. Another celebration area, the response to the survey question around feeling safe to respectfully challenge the ideas of others in the class. And this work was sparked by the idea of relevance, and we're still seeing low numbers both from or rates of agreement from our males of color and our all students that they agree that their experience in classroom is relevant to skills they'll need to be successful outside of school. In our learning section, we really focused this one semester on teacher learning awareness, what it takes to plan for something like project-based instruction, and really shifting to that student-centered experience, learning about culturally inclusive classroom practices, and the health of a PLC, the kind of teamwork it takes on to dig into some ambitious instructional strategies and risks that they may not have taken before, especially when including student voice at that early level of instructional planning. And then a continuing monitoring for learning, thriving, and belonging in a way that we haven't done at the PLC level. Our next steps include scaling these practices. I think we've started to develop a proof of concept that these elements that we're coaching these PLCs around can and will make a difference for students. And it's actually ending driving our vision for curriculum improvement writ large, not just with these focused PLCs, but what does this mean for our both intended and enacted curriculum in a way that's self-sustaining at the PLC level.
All right. So for an update on our attendance committee, we have Allison Vukovic and Jill Pageant.
Hi, I'm Allison Vukovic, Director of Community and Schools. And I'm Jill Pageant. I'm the District Coordinator for Community Schools. We were charged with developing and helping support the Attendance Advisory Committee for the district. The advisory committee began meeting in September and is comprised of community and family voice, as well as voice from across our district staff. And really the purpose of the committee is to assess our current policy practices related to student attendance across the district, and then future state to develop, implement, and monitor practices in our attendance policy in an aim to increase student attendance. So far where we've started, we worked with the committee on really taking a deep analysis at our current attendance policy, coupled with our student attendance data, especially that data for our males of color. And we have, in order to support our additional findings around our policy analysis and our attendance data analysis, we conducted process audits with our high schools and Scavo Full Service High School to understand how is the policy currently implemented, how are practices currently implemented, interventions, and so that we can take that information back to the committee in order to develop some recommendations for the future state of our attendance policy, which I'll let Allison share.
So our learnings thus far, attendance is really complex, which that shouldn't be a surprise to any of you. But I think what we've learned is that we rely really heavily on automated phone calls and things like that. What we found out when we talked to the schools and we really kind of dug into the data is that's not really effective. What's effective for our students and families is that personal connection. So we know, like what Sarah talked about, that classroom and that teacher relationship is number one. But when we aren't getting kids at that level, we have to really step up our interventions at a tier 2 and tier 3 level. So those are really personal connections, phone calls, home visits. How are we utilizing our staff, success case managers, bilingual family liaisons to make those contacts meaningful? So we're really looking at that and how we can develop that with our school teams and really start to move that data. So our next steps, we actually meet with the attendance team Thursday. We're going to dig into some revisions. What we really want to look at are two things that kept coming up at all the schools we visited. Extended leave. So maternity leave policy, we do not currently have for our young moms. So we really want to look at that. And then we have a lot of students that travel out of the country. We have not done a lot of guidance on schools on how to handle that. So we want to dig into that data on how we can best support students, but also understand that if they're missing a month, sometimes two, we've got to develop a plan on the front end. So we're going to really dig into some of that. So looking at interventions at a certain level, at a tier 2 and tier 3, and what is going to be required as we look at enrollment of our students.
Thank you. Next, we'll talk about the equity coach position. I'll have Jamaro talk about that position.
So that position was created last year in an effort to increase the support we provided to the building level with equity so that the principal didn't feel that they had to do all the work alone. And we thought about the best format for the position. At first was going to be a stipend position, and the more we thought about the complexity of the job, we just didn't think that would work. Having a full-time job and doing that on the side would not be feasible for somebody. And so Dr. Hart approved that this position would be a fully released position that would just focus on equity. And we piloted that in 3 schools. Roosevelt, Hoyt, and Cattell we are still piloting that and working closely with the 3 principals and the 3 equity coaches to find the best format for us to expand that later, if possible. So instead of us sharing about the equity coach position and what they have been up to, we would like to invite them to talk to you tonight, and so that you could meet them, the 3 principals and the 3 equity coaches, and hear from them firsthand to understand how it's going. So Mr. Biggs and Nicole are our first ones to share a little bit of their journey with the equity coach pilot.
Good evening. I'm going to pass the mic here shortly to the young lady that receives all of the credit. At the end of last school year, Roosevelt had a chronic absenteeism issue, and our African-American males contributed about 57% of all African-American males at Roosevelt were chronically absent, which is quite a big number. And that is actually about 7% lower as it was in early January of 2018. How did we know that? Well, we noticed that students were in the hallways a lot. The number one referral data indicated that students were out of bounds, meaning they were in the building, but they weren't going to the class. They might go to the class for 5 minutes and then leave. They were escaping. We talked to parents. We met with parents over the summer and throughout the year to learn their perspective and input. We talked to students. We've created a number of diversity and leadership councils that I meet with regularly to get student input and student voice and to figure out what are we doing wrong as the adults in the building and what do we need to do differently as teachers and administrators to build those relationships, to build relevance in the classroom. We looked at attendance data on a weekly basis. We talked to parents more frequently than we ever have before. We had a problem, and if students weren't in the classroom, then they weren't learning. And if they're not in the classroom but in the building, that's a concern as well that we needed to address. So I'm going to let Nikki take over and talk about some of the things that we've been doing at Roosevelt to address those issues. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Nikki Ellis. I'm the equity coach at Roosevelt. And I just want to start off by saying that this is a small component of the work that we've been doing. And so if you're interested in learning more, you're welcome to come out and join us at any time to learn more about how the Equity Change Project is impacting our school. So this was our data that we were working with, and we wanted to figure out how do we respond to that data. Because looking at having 57% of our African American males chronically absent is unacceptable, and we've got to look at our responsibility as the adults in the building. So we created an action plan. And the first component of that action plan was, after talking to students about the lack of relevancy and engaging curriculum, to figure out what we needed to change within the instruction in our classrooms. And so we did a lot of work with all of our staff around visioning an ideal state. What is a culturally inclusive classroom? What are some of the resources that we can look at together? And we gave them input into building consensus around that. And then we took that same information to our school leadership team, as well as many different students, including the ones who were chronically absent, and asked them, what are you missing? And how does this culturally inclusive classroom respond to your needs? From there, I created a coaching tool that is enacted with PLCs and in classrooms, and also students use it as a coaching tool with teachers to change our practices and to constantly improve our instruction. And so there are 6 elements that were represented in our culturally inclusive classrooms, and some of those are involving student voice, social emotional learning, rigorous tasks, and students as the holders of knowledge rather than the teacher. And so another component of our work has been to also bring students to our professional development time, specifically students who might have been labeled chronically absent, to provide their feedback on instruction about what's missing regularly to their teachers. So the first time we did that was back in November, and we had 30 students participate, 1/3 of who were Black males. And then we're about to do the same thing next week with 150 plus students, 1/3 of who are Black males. And so we've provided them the space and the training to understand what is an anti-racist institution and how does culturally inclusive practices in the classroom respond to the needs of students in terms of equity. And so when we look at that data, for our first cycle of implementation of this process, we saw a decrease of 13% in chronic absenteeism for our Black male students from November 1st until December 21st. And so the variable that was changed during that time was that culturally inclusive classrooms were being implemented with fidelity, both through PLCs, with administrator coaching, with teacher coaching, and through student-to-teacher coaching.
Thank you. Next, we're going to call the principal at Hoyt, Deb Marker, and Cindy, the equity coach at Hoyt.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Deb Markert, and I am the principal at Hoyt Middle School.
And I'm Cindy Windsor, the equity coach at Hoyt.
We also took a hard look at our data and found that one of the areas of discrepancies for Hoyt Middle School were our males of color as well, in the areas of a disproportionality in referrals, as well as a discrepancy in growth in both reading and in math. And so as we began this work at the beginning of the year, we saw the connectedness between the equity work that we were doing as well as our School for Rigor work that we are in year 2 for. And so we wanted the staff to understand and to see the connectedness, and we didn't want this to be standalone work. We didn't want there to be equity days and instructional days with professional development around 2 separate things. We wanted to bring the connectedness to light, and we wanted them to feel that connectedness and to understand how equity is part of everything and touches nearly every aspect of what we're trying to do with changing instructional practices at Hoyt. So I just wanted you to hear me say that there is a definite connectedness there, and Cindy has done a great job of working with our instructional coaches. And so we really have a triad approach where the instructional coaches, Cindy is our equity coach, along with our teacher PLCs, are working together to change practice and to change their thinking on implicit bias and some of the things that play into your unconscious biases when you're working with people. So I'll let Cindy explain what she's been doing.
Thank you. Good evening again. So we started off with some pre-service work. So when we came back to school in August, before the kids even came, we took a look at the equity profile on the Tableau report, and we asked teachers to create narratives around specific demographics that are on that equity profile. And it was powerful for them to all see, as we walked around, all the different stories based on data as they moved into that school year. So that was kind of how we kind of jumped off the school year, looking at the data and creating those narratives. Creating an equity core team has been a great experience because I've had 15 teachers who have volunteered to come in twice a month out of contract time. They're coming in the mornings, and they created their own values and their purpose and action steps. And one of the things they wanted to do, we're doing a book study. Have you ever seen this one? This is a great book. So we're doing a book study around this. So reading on our own, just like any book study you would do, and then coming back and having discussion and questions, and how does that connect to the classroom? Also, some of those action steps that they created are being implemented kind of as we speak. We're having some of those co-generative dialogues taking place. There are teachers who are implementing Genius Hour, and so the voice and choice, when I speak about later, that perception survey, that's where that big disconnect was, kids not feeling that their lessons are relevant, their activities are relevant. So the Genius Hour is kind of, again, these things are starting to actually come to fruition, which is exciting to see. And even members are presenting, so they're taking that ownership as we build the capacity for others on this equity core team to do equity work, that this is not just my work, this is the work of everybody, how to see it when they're lesson planning, when they're teaching, what's on their walls, and they're kind of taking the lead and presenting also on the equity core team, or even at full staff PDs. I've asked them to do that as well. I mentioned the survey. This was a perception survey. We put together 12 questions, and initially we had our at-risk kids take this. And of course, within that were some males of color. And then we had specifically had males of color take the exact same survey, and we got exactly what we were hoping, the perception, what is their view of Hoyt when they are there, their experience at school. And across the races, we were actually able to see that's exactly where that, we could see our highs and our lows, but that growth point was really the relevancy of lessons and activities. Last two, the support. Support has looked different for me throughout the year and at different times. It's one-on-one support if I'm going and doing a walkthrough and I'm able to give feedback on an equity audit form, and sometimes conversations afterwards. Oftentimes it is in different PDs. We have embedded PDs, so that would be small group, like 6th grade team, 7th grade team, getting to see everyone throughout the day, but having that specific time with those groups, but also PDs for the whole staff on early at Wednesdays. And Deb mentioned getting into PLCs. This is kind of a new place where I'm going and trying to have that triad with instructional coach, the PLC, and myself, and we're trying to figure out what that might look like. How can that benefit teaching and learning to have all three of us together? And then finally, the data that you're going to speak on here at the end, but continuing to look at core data, map data, and that equity profile, and how our teachers, myself, all of us implicating ourselves in that data.
I'm sorry, could you tell us the name of the book? You held it up and I couldn't read it from where I'm sitting.
I didn't know if I should bring a show and tell, but I did. Is everyone really equal? Is everyone really equal?
It's coming to Ames, and it's a free event next week.
Yeah, one of the authors, Robin DeAngelo, she's the person that coined the term white fragility. So she's a speaker in Ames Tuesday. So anyway.
Really, this last slide just shows some data that supports the efforts and the fruit of the work that's been happening. And so we are pleased to see that for our African American males, this data is specific to them, that we have seen an increase in the number of students who have fewer than one or 0 or 1 level 2 office referrals. So that you can see has gone from 69% to 94% in December. So that was a great increase in the number of students who were receiving referrals on a monthly basis. We also saw a decrease in the number of students who had 2 to 5 referrals from October to December, and you can see that we had a nice decrease there from 18% to 6%. MAP scores as well, we had some really nice growth from fall to winter scores in both math and in reading, and you can see the percentage there in front of you that we saw in growth. So we were encouraged by that, and I won't lie, had a little celebration around that. And so we're looking forward to what the second semester brings as we continue to do this work.
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy and Deb. Now we're going to invite Tiana Sandibald, the principal at Cattell, and Nadia Drake, the equity coach there.
Good evening, I'm Tiana Sambold, the principal at Cattell.
I'm Nadia Drake, the equity coach at Cattell.
When we started this journey in the summer, we started looking at data and noticed that academic achievement for students receiving special education and language supports was significantly discrepant from their peers. You can see there, on average, the Black males were 8% discrepant, but students who receive special education services are 23% discrepant, and students who receive language supports were 16% discrepant. So based on that data, Nadia and I started putting together some action plans, and she's going to share that with you.
Sorry, when we're talking about discrepant, are we just talking about like the disproportionality between their peers? Okay.
Yes.
Understood, thank you.
So we wanted teachers to intentionally collaborate and examine their biases and expectations for students who receive these supports, ultimately knowing that when they do that, it's going to support all of our students. This is a big goal for us to tackle, and it won't be achieved within 1 year. We know this is a multiple year goal, but know that it's going to have a huge impact on student data. So when we look at our action steps, this is our first year for Schools for Rigor, which provides us that opportunity for intentional collaborations and the high expectations for our students. When we started this, we found that specifically our older students didn't like to be pulled from the class to receive their support because they were being pulled from that team task time. So we piloted a co-teaching model with 1 4th grade class and 1 5th grade class, where the special education teacher and the ELL teachers co-planned and co-taught with the general education teacher, and those students did not receive their accommodations outside of the classroom. They received it inside of the classroom. When we looked at our winter MAP data, those 2 classrooms had the highest students that achieved their projected growth for MAP. And then with all of our teachers, they've entered intentional action planning around instruction and rigorous tasks, as well as positive student and teacher relationships. So when we look at the rigorous tasks, we're wanting teachers to recognize when they're automatically lowering those expectations based upon biases, labels, or just simply thinking that students can't achieve what they want them to. So we want them to be able to develop those high engaging, rigorous tasks, and then providing those scaffolds if need be, not automatically providing them for them, let them struggle a little bit, and then provide those scaffolds if need be. When we look at the relationship side, we really encourage teachers to look at students' behaviors and what triggers those behaviors, but then also looking at student behaviors that trigger us as adults and how we react to that. As an adult, we know that we are more likely to be in control of our emotions over a student. So if we can recognize our triggers, we're more likely able to support our students. As a result, if you look at the slide, when we look at our winter MAP data and talking about those 2 co-teaching classrooms, when we put just those 2 classrooms in with our data, overall our students grew 10% more students were meeting that projected growth. The Black males grew by 23% more students meeting the projected growth. Special education students grew by 11% more students meeting their projected growth, and ELL grew by 13% more students meeting their projected growth. The other thing that we did as a leadership team, we increased our tier 2 and 3 supports on the general education side. We took our behavior strat, we gave her a classroom to mimic what it would look like with those students being in the classroom. We're able to provide a work break schedule, intentional social skills, for example, and what we're seeing, we just started this when we came back in the January. So what we're seeing so far is an increase in student work, and those students are in the classroom a lot more than what they are, but they're able to go to that classroom for those breaks and those intentional social skills. The other thing that we're seeing is a shift in beliefs and biases around instruction and relationships. So similar to Cindy, we gave a survey to our teachers instead on their beliefs and biases, and at the beginning of the year, they felt that they had those high expectations, that they weren't lowering them, but their language around that would say otherwise. When we gave that survey again at the beginning of the month, we're noticing that teachers are reflecting much deeper. One teacher stated that she makes sure she always is expecting the same quality of work from all students and not changing expectations based on student diversity as she was previously. When we shift and look at social emotional, we're again seeing that shift of looking at different behaviors and what those triggers are. And a teacher stated that their behavioral expectations have changed because I'm really trying to find the why behind the behaviors and put things in place to help the students regulate their emotions. So overall, with all of our action steps and the results, we're starting to see shifts in instruction and student achievement at Cattell.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So lastly, we're just going to do a quick update on our Schools for Rigor, and Noel Tickey's going to provide that update. And just we wanted to provide this update because in the past we have highlighted the work as closing the gap for males of color, so we wanted to make sure that you saw that data this time.
Good evening, Board. I'm Noel Tickey, Executive Director for Teaching and Learning. And so I'm going to give you just a high-level overview of how we're closely monitoring. You're well aware of the investment that's been made in our Schools for Rigor. So we're looking tonight at 2 data sets, one for our demonstration schools, who are in year 3 of their implementation, and how are the males of color doing in those schools as compared to all of their schools. And then we'll also look at our cohort 2 schools when we look at reading and math. So first, looking at our demonstration schools, the percent of students chronically absent, you can see that we're doing significantly better with African American males, K-5, in our demo schools as compared to our non-demo schools, almost double, or more than double. 0 to 1 referrals, we're looking at a significant difference of 82% of our students in our have less than 2 referrals in our demo schools as compared to 69% in our other schools. The out-of-school suspension, this is average days per student. Obviously, that's a very small number when you look at it, but nonetheless, it's still outperforming our other schools. This data set looks at the 3-year trend, so from fall 2016 to 2018, and this is math in particular, so looking at the percent of students who are not at risk. So looking at our demo schools, there's some significant differences looking at Hispanic males as well as our African American males when compared to other schools. That same trend has continued for reading, we're pleased to say. And this is looking at grades 2 through 12, including our elementary, middle, and high school demo schools. Our Hispanic males, again, percent not at risk is increasing significantly and has increased significantly in these schools, as well as our African American males as compared to our other schools, all other schools who were actually losing some ground. So that's another conversation for another night. But we're hopeful that the things that we're putting in place in these schools is yielding some nice results. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I apologize. I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So when we're saying not at risk, this is showing that are we saying that MAP scores
yes
predetermine some sort of like at risk based on your score?
Correct.
So the number of students who are at risk for falling behind or not graduating or whatever.
There's a line, a cut line that says this percentage is at risk and this percentage is not at risk. We don't use the word proficiency because it's not proficiency, but it would be a close comparison to looking at a cut score versus the college and career ready, which is a really high cut score. This is more kind of who should we be worried about and who do we feel they're on track and doing well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to shift to cohort 2. The differences are not as significant. They're in their second year of implementation, whereas our demo schools are in their third year of implementation. But still, the trend remains to where they are doing better than all other schools. So this looks at grades 2 through 8. When we look at all males, and then how do our African Americans, males, and Latino males fare in comparison to other schools. Looking at the same trend continues for reading. Again, this is a 3-year trend looking at the percent of students not at risk. Has increased slightly in grades 2 through 8, looking at our cohort 2 schools. In cohort 2 schools, that cohort 2 is made up of 16 schools, so it's a larger number of schools in that data set. But we're still hopeful, especially when a lot of those gains we saw in the second and third years. It's still early, and we're keeping a close eye, and hopefully those gains continue into spring, and then again, of course, next year.
All right, that's our update on the Males of Color report. We have pause for some questions.
Thank you. Board, any questions or comments? Anybody? Heather?
Hi, I don't actually have a question. I think I really like how you're integrating it, and it's not just one. It's not like separated into silos or whatever. So great work. Thanks.
Rob?
Two points, one small one, one micro question, which is I've found the information really interesting about the interventions at the 3 different schools. In terms of Cattell, the co-teaching with the special education teacher and the ELL teacher, is that scalable for grades beyond 4 and 5? Do we need to add teachers to make that realistic, or?
A lot of what we are observing, we still need to think about how to scale up, because especially with the budget we have right now, we have seen that they are tailoring their approach based on the school's needs and the staff that they have in place, so that instead of adding a lot of people, we're trying to build the capacity within the team that they already have, so that when the equity coach is not there anymore, the team is able to do what they're trying to do. But of course, some of those things we'll have to talk to Dr. Ehart and Matt and the board about, to see how we could come to a place where we could implement them in a larger scale. We want to give it more time to make sure that we know exactly what works and what's the best approach for us to take as we scale up, instead of scaling up without knowing, So we are taking it slow, but that's something that is in my mind constantly, how we're going to scale this up,
And the second point to Dr. Ahart, so we received multiple monitoring reports on males of color and all 4 of our priorities. And this is, I think, has been a developing process, and one where you're getting a lot of feedback from the board about how monitoring is done. And I just want to share my satisfaction with this report. Typically it's not a good thing to have a monitoring report be completely anecdotal, but knowing that this is the first one in the series and that the data doesn't come until the end, this actually makes a lot of sense to me in terms of how we do monitoring, and that's just my perspective. But I enjoyed having this opportunity to hear what's happening, understanding that the data that'll let us know if we're meeting goals is going to come in the future one.
Oh, good. That's very helpful.
Deanna?
Thank you all. It's really good to, I agree with Rob, to hear what's happening in our schools. My first question is, I remember when we had the equity plan presented to us, it was a draft form. I don't think it was completed at that time. It was a couple of years ago. And I remember we talked about there weren't any goals attached at that point. It was a plan with a lot of inputs, but we hadn't necessarily talked about what do we want to see from students. And I'm just wondering if we're at a place now where we've attached some goals to the plan.
We have, and we are being very careful to align the goals with the KPIs so that we're not doing double work and
Got it.
measuring things that are not what you want to see measured.
Got it.
But something that it's really important for me is to wait for the students' suggestions. So that is finalized, but it's not because we want their action research and their findings to be the final part of our plan. And so that's the only thing pending. We did clarify some of the goals to make it more explicit and aligned with the board goals. But we do want the student voice to be part of our plan, and that's not yet. So as soon as that happens at the end of the year in June, we hope to provide you an update and have the students come and present the final goals and how the plan will shape up. But it is something that I'm really excited about, to have the community partners we have, the families we have, and the students' voice represented in the plan. And as you know, that takes time, you know, because we want for the students to be able to do their action research projects and to investigate the district using the tools they have learned how to create to add to the plan. So it's taking time. We're doing things slowly, but we're doing them really thoughtfully.
Yes.
And really embedding stakeholder voice, which I think it's how it should be done. So as we are building capacity, you know, and so the plan is still our guidance, but it's, as you know, in draft form just because we haven't had the stakeholder input finalized yet. As soon as we have that, you'll see the final version. But thanks for asking about that.
No, that's so exciting to me to hear that piece of it. And I know we're doing work as a board with the superintendent and administration as well to do our part on our end. So I'm just excited to actually see our students' voices be, or their work, because that's right, they're doing research, right?
Yes.
Oh, that's so
They
dope.
have worked with, we have a phenomenal teacher leading the course this year. Her name is Catherine Peterson. I'd encourage you to come and visit. Your daughter is part of the class, so I'm sure you know a little bit more about the course and how it's going, but it's really inspirational to go and see the students. We had a meeting last month where they had a lot of questions about standard reference grading, and we asked them to compile their questions, gave it to Noel's team, and they revised them and came to talk to them. And it was so inspiring to see them advocating for their own education and experiences in a way that was really professional, respectful, and even when they disagreed, was very well done. They are highly engaged, and we have 52 students signed up for the course next year. And we're gonna have to build capacity to have another instructor, because every one of them wants to be a part of this. And so we are finding that when they are examining our own barriers as a system and trying to come up with solutions, they want to come to class and they want to use their voice and they want to be, they are part of our solution. And so to me, this course is, it's going really well, and it's an amazing opportunity for us as a district to learn how to use the student voice.
Could you remind me how many students are currently in the course?
Yes, we have 17. We had 19. 2 dropped because they moved out of the state. We don't have attendance problems in that course. They are there. Even with the winter we have had, they come. And they partnered with a Drake professor to learn how to do social research and develop the instruments they need for their research, their action project. And now they are starting to do their research. And in June, we expect them to provide suggestions to how can we as a district become better at including students who are Black and Latino. And so you should come and observe the class. It's an amazing opportunity. And the teacher we have is phenomenal. So we have, I think we have, I wrote down here to tell you, we have 9 sophomores. We have, let me see, I wrote down because I wanted to have that information in case you wanted to know. We don't have any juniors. The 2 that moved out were juniors, but we have a mix of sophomores, seniors, and let me see, I'll find the numbers and share with you.
Are they all students of color?
No, a lot of them are. A lot of them are. This year, what we did was, last year we recruited them. I went to the high schools and I talked to the counselors, and I asked for the students who were having the worst grades, the worst attendance, and not showing up. And they gave me their names, and I talked with them, and they enrolled for the course. This year, the enrollment was open, and so we got a really interesting mix of kids. We didn't have a lot of male students
I was
enrolled.
going to ask, yeah.
A lot of female. students is just one boy, but a lot of them are of color, a lot of them are immigrant students, and we have a couple that are gay. So we have a mix, a good mix of different racial ethnicity, LGBT, but we want to have more boys take next year. So the ones that are interested so far are a good mix between female and male. So we are excited about that.
How did the group, and so contrast from the first year to the second year when you did the recruitment yourself?
Attendance is better this year because last year we got chronic absent kids and they were dealing with a lot of personal issues, and we wanted them for a reason. We wanted to elevate their voice because they were the kids that we never heard from, and so that was really helpful. But that didn't allow us to complete their action research because they didn't come as often as they needed to move on with their action research. And I really want their suggestions at the plan. So this year we have a combination of chronically absent and students who come more regularly, although we have a very rich diversity in the class. So I feel like it's moving along a little better. I think the teacher we have is part of how it's going so well. She is very skilled at, she doesn't stand in front of them, she just sits back and they run the class. It's just unbelievable. I would encourage you to come and watch and observe a class. It's something else. It's really a good experience to see.
I would love to, and I'm harping on that because I do think it's important, particularly if their research is going to be used to inform the plan. Who's in that group matters.
Yes.
And particularly when we're talking about males of color and we're talking about black males and brown
Yes.
males, and if they're, you know what I'm saying?
I do, I totally
So I know you're
agree.
following me, Jamar. I
Yes.
apologize. The equity coaches that we have, you talked about plans to expand. What's the training how are equity coaches chosen?
We had an internal committee made up of 12 people. The principals were a part of it, but we had other people representing the district. And we have a lot of staff members who are Black and Latino helping with the selection. When we had the interview, so we met with this team 4 times before the interview to define what we wanted to see and what skills were needed for this position, to write the job description, to really envision the position. When we had the interview, we were a bit disappointed we didn't get a lot of racial diversity in the applications. But we understand that our workforce is mainly white, and so that was a bummer, but not surprising. We selected them based on the skills the committee defined as crucial for the position. And I was really proud of the way we went about it, because it was really democratic. We had long debates about who were the best candidates, and partnered with the New York Leadership Academy to support them with the training that they needed to carry on their positions. And so the equity coaches count with, them and their principals as well, count with year-long PDs with a coach that comes and meets with them 4 times a year. They have a supervisor who is part of Noel's team, and we wanted for them to be part of teaching and learning, to integrate their work with instruction in a very intentional way. And I also support them, so they meet with me once a month. And so we have tried to support them as much as we can, knowing that this is a tough job, it's a new job, and that the buildings where they were placed, the buildings were selected intentionally as well, according to needs. And so the directors who work with those buildings met with this committee and suggested 2 or 3 buildings, and the committee then decided on one. But it was a group team effort. And if you want to know more, I'll be happy to share with you. But we were very careful in how to select, because I want for this to work, and so we wanted to get the best people we could to do this. This is not easy work, especially coming to a building that you're not part of and trying to build the relationships while at the same time doing the work, and challenging people and trying to change practice. I have been really happy about how they have been embedded in their buildings, and I thank the principals who have fully embraced them and have really leveraged their support in the work they're doing. And they are part of the leadership team in the buildings, and they all have an office in the buildings. And so it's been exciting to see how they all have found their path where they are.
Thank you.
Yes.
2 final things, and I'm done. The first is, That's not the right thing to, I can only be me. Shout out to the work that you all are doing with the attendance work in the committee. And I just wanted to highlight something that you all shared, because we had a student that came to one of our community sessions that was talking about how our current drop policy affects students, particularly students who are immigrants and go home to visit family. And they were really advocating and saying this is not working for so many of us. And I didn't realize until a recent school visit that students are dropped after 2 weeks. And that did, I'm like, 2 weeks? That's vacation that I could take from work, right? And a lot of things could happen in that time, and I'm sure there are lots of factors that impact that behind the scenes, which I got a little bit of on that visit. But I just want to lift that up I'm happy you all are talking about it and that we're thinking about ways to address that. And then my final thing is, I guess I just want to, as a board, right, we typically look at this work and we see what the district is doing, but we haven't actually put any, I mean, we've declared our priorities, but in terms of training, I think that it might actually be a really good point. I mean, we may or may not, we're all going to leave at some point, right? And we're all at different places on our own journeys, and I think that we should, if we're going to expect our staff and our leadership teams to undergo training, I'm gonna say anti-racism training, I think that we should do the same thing as a board, so.
I found a number of students for you.
Oh, cool.
We have 9 freshmen, 6 sophomores, and 2 seniors right now. 17 kids.
Awesome. Thank you. I was wondering why you were shuffling those papers. You were looking for those
I
numbers.
know, I was. I finally found it.
9 freshmen.
6 sophomore and 2 seniors.
Got
and
it.
the 2 juniors we had moved.
Okay.
But we do want to recruit more male students to that class, for sure.
To the folks at Roosevelt, I know I said I was done, but when you said you had 1/3 of your students who were Black males, what was the feedback that you heard from them that was specifically, did it change anything that you all were doing? What did you hear? Sorry to put you on the spot. We were.
So when we talked to our Black male students, and actually we just started to engage in some of the prep work for next week today. So again, if you have time next Wednesday, please come join us and check out what we're doing. I'll be happy to send you that information. So when we talk to our Black male students about what is missing in the classroom, we first kind of drill into relationships and this component of teachers who are not yet equipped with the necessary supports on how to build relationships with students who are culturally different from them. And then the other component is a lot of our Black male students don't feel that their wealth of knowledge is honored. So a lot of the work that we've been doing is around YOSO's cultural wealth model and accessing the cultural capital that our students already have when they come to the classroom. So switching from a model of the teacher as the holder of knowledge to the students as the holder of knowledge, and then really accessing the knowledge that in a traditional classroom is not necessarily addressed, to create a sense of all of our students as being fully capable and equipped with an ample amount of knowledge to share with and co-teach to their peers.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I'm done.
Kirsten. First off, I want to say thank you for taking the time to prepare this report, which I could tell you all spent a lot of time preparing to come talk to us. So one of the first things that I think we've really dug into is the age of the Student Equity Advisory Council. And I guess my question is, can you give us, and maybe you can't at this time, but a hint of the research that they're doing? Are they going to be speaking just with other high school students? Or will they be talking to middle school? I see a shake of head. So I'm hoping they're talking to younger students maybe as part of their research
You're
too.
not guiding them in their
Okay.
action research at all. They picked what they want to examine.
Yeah, so
and everything
yeah,
is
so what
free
was
game.
their
It's
direction?
fair
Okay.
game. So some of them are going to elementary schools, some of
Okay.
them are going to middle schools, some of them are going to high schools, and they just landed on their topic, each one of them, that they really are passionate and want to dig deeper into. And so it all varies depending on their interests, but it's all related to equity.
Okay.
It's really interesting. You should plan to go there and hear them talk about it. It's really fascinating. And now we are in the process of developing, the teacher is guiding them to develop the tools they're going to need, the interviews, the surveys, whatever they're going to need to implement their research project, and then they're going to come up with the findings. If you want to add something, I know you.
Yeah, my daughter actually had her research day today, so she's in that process. And I have to say that just being a parent and seeing the excitement from a child who wasn't excited about school her junior year, she was not excited to come to school, to see her transition into taking ownership of this and knowing that her voice is going to be heard as she's on her way out. Mrs. Peterson is amazing. I've been in the classroom to speak. I've been there to observe them. The kids are super excited about the work that they're doing and that they're actually going to have this ownership of the research that they're going to do, and how they present it. I know it's going to be up to them, but it is truly amazing to see them, do this kind of work now on a high school level of things that I don't know if I really did all of that when I was in college, but she is truly, truly enjoying it. And I haven't had a chance to talk to her, but I know tonight she'll share with me how her research is starting to go, and she's very excited for it. So I just think that the work that we're doing is amazing, and that you all are doing, and it's really allowing our students to have a voice in a different way that I know I haven't seen in a long time. So I think if you all have a chance to go to that class, I strongly encourage you to visit her class.
So do I. I think it's unbelievable to see what they're doing and how they're doing it. I wish that was happening everywhere.
And you'd given us just a brief update on Project Crave. And one of the things, it sounds like some of that work, at least the work that you talked to us about tonight, is focused around PLCs and the work that teachers are doing. And so my question was, I think in the past, some certain courses were getting reimagined, like English 1 and I think algebra and some other ones. And so I'm just wondering, what does the institutional change look like that's maybe coming with this? Are course descriptions changing? How does this factor into when you're hiring new teachers who will be taking on these courses? What does that process look at more of an institutional level?
I'm happy to speak to that. I think what we're getting is a better grip on what the materials and the guidance looks like for teachers in order to do that in a more self-sustaining way. So part of that was to create the products and to find out from teachers and the students they were teaching what they might need in terms of materials, supports, professional development, and what their curriculum guides should really look like so that they can independently put those things into practice and help their peers put into practice. So it is leading us to some things, reimagining the courses that we offer, the ones that you mentioned, and what those look like. What does Algebra 1 look like with culturally inclusive practices and project-based learning? That's something that's not super familiar, I think, to many people in this room right now. But not just what the content of the course looks like, but the course pathways and what the models look like for institutionalized student voice as a part of that, not left up to chance or whim, but to embed it into those performance assessments. And so I think it's causing us to ask a lot of questions about how we can do that sustainably and, like you said, in a systemic manner, not just with specific PLCs, but to have the opportunity to work really deeply with those PLCs at a weekly sort of frequency has helped us accelerate our learning and our access to students in the moment.
Okay, so what I'm hearing then is that institutional systemic change is happening, but it's happening at the PLC level kind of up. So instead of writing new course descriptions and then dictating down, the teachers are doing the work with their students' voices, and then it's going to come up. Okay.
And that teachers have always been a critical part of our of the way we design courses and curriculum. What hasn't been a critical part is students and doing that work with teachers while they're teaching, not waiting for summer, not assuming what kids want, but engaging in the reimagination and redesign as teachers and curriculum coordinators and students are working together. That's new.
So it's another example of elevating student voice into the work we're doing with curriculum.
And I'll be interested to see how that ties with those students that are involved in that process to, I'm going to totally blank on the name, of our students that we're trying to get into the teaching profession, of how the students are involved. Yes, how this will impact some of the dream work and what we might see, I don't know, in 10 years in terms of who are the teachers that will be working in our system. So.
I don't know any district in the nation doing this work like they have been doing. It's really new work involving students into curriculum redesign And I think it's the best way to elevate students' voice because due to our research and the findings we had on the student survey we sent last year, curriculum relevance was #1 reason why they weren't coming. Relationships was #2. And so that's a response to that. So I'm really excited about the way they're leading that work.
I think one additional item I'll add to that is starting to dig into how we make the relationships and the social and emotional learning competencies wrapped around curriculum. And again, not just an add-on or something separate, but how do these social and emotional and relationship skills between me and my peers as a student, between myself and my teacher, and the other way, and how does that relate deeply to the content I'm learning and help us actually get better at both at the same time? And that's some of the new work that's being included as well.
So every work we have presented today is a result of the students' voice in that survey that we did last year for how to improve student attendance and get them to come and be excited about school. So the Project Crave, the equity coaches, trying to support more at the building level, the attendance committee, every one of those things we're doing is a result of direct input from students. So they're helping guide the work that we're doing for equity at the district, and I am very proud of that.
I just have two more things, sorry. So the equity coaches and that piece seems like it was set by the needs at those 3 buildings, and I think we alluded a little bit that this is something that over time we're taking it slowly, but we would like to level up. So I guess I'm just wondering if there's a plan, and maybe there's not an answer to this question tonight, but if there's a plan for how do we evaluate where to expand and where, and how does that fit in our budget? That might be more of a question for you, Tom.
Yeah, so I want to add one caveat, though. It wasn't just based on needs at our buildings, because we can identify
Needs
equity
at every
need
building,
in
yeah.
all of our buildings. It was so that was an important piece of it, but it was also where's the team in that building at relative to being willing to own their reality and to address these inequities. So that's why Roosevelt and Hoyt and Gattell were chosen in large part because they had the will to look in the mirror and say, this is something that we really need to work on. So we were looking for the right conditions where we could have proof points that this model can work. And so the barriers to expanding it are, unfortunately, are many, but they're pretty simple. One is resources. You know, when we're faced with the level of funding that we have, adding positions means subtracting somewhere else. At present, it does. And then the other, which is in some ways more important, is finding, we can't recreate those 3 coaches that you saw tonight magically. It's a special person who can do that work well, who can interface with students and understand students and know how to work with their colleagues and push them to coordinate their work with the other leadership in their building. So we're doing, I think, a fantastic job of building that capacity, and we could add more now. We could identify more coaches who could be successful for next year than we could have when we were doing the hiring this past year. But having the resources to do that and feel like that's where we're going to get a bigger return on investment compared with what we're going to have to take away somewhere else is kind of the rub where we are. I'm really proud that we were able to figure out how to do this this year, and we're learning a tremendous amount. And we're also looking at, are there other ways that we can recreate it? We had mentioned, you know, that initially, Jill Mara described, you know, initially we were thinking, okay, we'll be able to do this as a stipended position. So I have a job as a teacher, say, or an instructional coach, and then I'll be stipended to do the equity work. And we, I think, wisely decided against that. However, that's not to say that, and I don't project anything here, people in the audience, so it's not to say that these 3 coaches, when we feel like their schools are ready, couldn't go and recreate this work in another school and have that work continue to be supported in a stipended position. So we're looking at different ways to continue to grow it and support it, but resources definitely are the biggest barrier.
Okay. I was just so excited about the work that the equity coaches are doing at these 3 buildings, and I recognize that if we looked at every building, there's probably some need that could be supported by the work that these coaches are doing. And so just continuing to be cognizant both for ourselves but our community of what we could do with more resources, I think is always great. And then this is a minor note, and this could just be who created the slides. And I know that sometimes Hispanic is a federal distinction and Latino is one that we often use because it's more inclusive and doesn't designate country of origin from Spain. So I'm just wondering how we use those terms in this work, and it doesn't appear to be standardized, I guess, and so I guess the question is there value to doing that, or do we always use these terms interchangeably? Do they mean the same thing?
Well, I take that personally because I am from Brazil. I'm not Hispanic. I consider myself Latina. So that's always
I'm
something.
Puerto Rican.
I know.
Yep.
So that's always something really close to my heart. Unfortunately, the federal standards that we have to report to call it Hispanic. So that's when we report data. That's why we have to use it Hispanic to align with how they require us to report. But when we do professional learning, we say Latino, and it's a more inclusive term. And I think that even we don't call groups subgroups, we call them groups because that has an implicit negative tone to it. When we look at data and say subgroups, let's see how the subgroups are doing. So we are very careful about language when we are doing professional learning, and we try to keep them consistent as we converse and do our work. But when it's data reporting, we have to align with federal and state mandates. So
that was kind of what I was inferring.
Yeah, I don't like it either, but that's all we have
just
to.
because I see both in your presentation and in the report that we got, and so
It's the same with African American. African refugees are not considered African American. Bosnian kids are not considered white, but we report them all together,
Yes.
And so it really bothers me, but unfortunately we have to play by those rules.
Okay.
But
And that was
thanks
just
for
really my
asking that.
question around what's the language that we use and
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you for asking that question.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Are you closing out, or do you have some more?
No,
I do want to respond to Tom's thought around hiring and something that you were talked about in terms of the candidate pool for our equity coaches being not diverse in terms of race. And in terms of the new coalition of Black educators groups that's starting up, I'm sure you're already thinking about this, but it might be a really good place to ask, why?
Yes,
You know?
I agree. And I have to say that the area of input we have lacked so far in our work is teacher's voice. We have done a really good job at leadership voice, student voice, community voice, and family voice. I feel like we haven't as a district focused for equity specifically on teacher voice, and that committee is going to be our beginning with teacher voice, really listening to the experiences of the Black teachers in the district, and I'm hoping we'll get an LGBT group as well and a Latinx group as well, and just learn from their suggestions and embed them into our work, because we have to have teacher voice as present as the other stakeholders' voices, and we haven't gotten that done yet. So I'm really excited about that opportunity with that group. Mr. Lee is a really passionate person, and I think he's going to do a phenomenal job leading that team. So we're really excited about supporting him and collaborating with him without interfering with his leadership and the way he wants to lead that team. So it's going to be really exciting.
Anybody else? Thank you very much. I have nothing unique to add, but I do echo the comments on the positive comments on all the work that's happening. So
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is item F3, financial conditions and activities, second quarter, 2.4. Superintendent Ahart, would you introduce the item, I guess?
Yes, you receive 4 of these reports each year. This is the report for the second quarter. There is no presentation.
May I have a motion and a second to accept this report as compliant with Management Limitation Policy 2.4, financial conditions and activities?
I move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions? Please vote. Motion passes 6-0. Next item on our agenda is item F4, our board work plan. The board lays out the means by which we agree to governing the district on behalf of the community and for the benefit of our students through our governance process policies and our board management delegation policies. The board self-monitors so that we fulfill this agreement, and the board's work plan further details work we've committed to doing and fulfilling our governance duties with integrity. According to our governance process policy 1.1.5, the board will allow no officer, individual, or committee of the board to hinder or be an excuse for fulfilling its commitments. And with that in mind, the board's work plan is a standing agenda item as a part of our self-monitoring and accountability process. Kirsten has agreed to lead this discussion for this item, so I'll turn it over to her.
I'm a little bit relieved that half the audience disappeared for this part.
They don't know what they're missing.
I know. So for next board coaching schedule, my understanding is that we've all filled out a doodle now at this point, and so hopefully we'll hear back shortly about when our next session will be scheduled. As far as superintendent compensation, I believe we have all of those items ready to go for our work session following the meeting. If anyone has anything to add to that before we get there, Deanna, at work session probably? Okay. And then in terms of our equity policy, I know that there were some questions by email that you had asked me, and I'd gotten back to.
I told you we're good.
We're
That
good
was
now.
fine.
Okay, so I will be bringing that with me to agenda planning tomorrow, and we'll discuss what our next steps are as far as when that gets put on the agenda. The board listening sessions, it said on the 5th that we wanted to engage with more students in similar sessions to those held by next board, and this ad hoc committee will, within the next month, be included with that collected by next board. So I have not yet seen anything on that. Who do we need to follow up with on that, Cindy? Okay.
So what I'll mention about that is if we're looking at potentially early March for having our next board folks come back to work with us, according to that doodle, there may not be opportunity to have additional student voice then in this first iteration of that work, but we will be going out again. And so perhaps what it would be better at this point in time, at least as far as for that phase of the work is to make sure that more are engaged in the second phase. That would be my thought toward that. And although I do think that's not to say that there isn't value in doing the listening sessions similar to what has already been done. It just might be too late for this first compilation of what the coaches will bring back to us. Any thoughts on that? Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe what we want to focus on prior to the session with next board, is to focus on the process that we might use to get student feedback once we have our step 2. And I guess I'm just wondering then, do the same people want to work on that process? Rob, Deanna, and myself were the ones that were on there.
I'm wondering if it needs to be a board process or if it's just, I don't know how the original community sessions were set up or scheduled, but just asking for more sessions with students. Like,
right
at the Fort Comprehensive High School is like, I don't know. I mean, we can. I don't know. I think now I am being honest about capacity, and I got super excited, but I don't have the capacity to lead that. So if somebody else on the board is interested and who also thinks this is important and wants to kind of lead that space, take it. But
I think the struggle that we're going to have here, what I'm thinking is, I definitely know that student voice is important, but I think that if we want to get student impact explicitly, I think we're going to have to think about how we want to do that, and we'll probably have to speak with staff, mostly because I know I personally cannot go to a session during a school day to meet with students, and so we're going to have to think about that process and talk with Tom about what kind of what kind of a lift that puts on staff to help support that, and if the balance between those two things makes sense, I guess,
Well,
between
I
the
think
staff
there
lift
was-
and.
I think maybe we're talking about different things. In terms of attending, I know that Dewana shared that she had capacity to attend, and I would have capacity to attend. But in terms of organizing and facilitating, I couldn't. So again, I don't know how these sessions were scheduled the first time.
Yeah,
but
so I guess what I'm talking about is, I guess as a board, we have to decide.
staff
Like,
put it,
like,
did it.
like, right, so staff put it together, so we'd have to decide as a board, how many of these do we want, where do we want them, and then we just have to say to staff, we'd like to schedule these, but we have to.
And
you
by
know, if-
when? too.
Yeah, if you guys would be willing to be
Understood.
facilitators, that's fine, I think we just have to decide when and how, so that we can direct staff to schedule them and then let them know that we would be coming in and that sort of thing. So I guess I'm just asking, do we want to hash that out now? Do we want to focus on it in a work session in March? Do we want to have a committee come back to the board in March with a proposal? I'm just asking, how do we want to tackle the work?
Can I
Yeah.
suggest, I think that there's a desire to have sessions like this. I think we all recognize that it can't happen before early March when next board is back. But if we get too far or we wait for another meeting before we agree to do this, then we'll be probably too close to the end of the school year. So I think what I would suggest is that we direct staff to set up sessions, and maybe we begin by focusing on each of the four of the comprehensive high schools plus Scavo, and see if we can do a session at each before the end of the year. If there's a desire to have, I think if it makes sense on the staff side to have one board member responsible for answering questions like, hey, listen, it may not make sense to do 6 of these, would you be comfortable with 3? I can be the person responsible for that to help move the process along. And so if my colleagues are willing, that would be the path I would suggest to move this one through, with the goal of having these done by the end of this school year.
So maybe sometime after spring break to the end of April?
Probably April, yeah.
Okay, so.
So you're saying you'll be the point person for staff to,
You don't want to do those sooner?
I think that's a conversation that we can have away from the board table, but the answer would be yes, and I don't have any objection. There's no hard and fast timetable, but yeah.
And I can help with that in any way, like either facilitating or being at the schools, I can be present. So I'm for doing it sooner rather than later as well. So as soon as we can get things started.
I just feel like the next step with next board would be more productive, perhaps, if we have the student voice piece in there, and then kind of move forward in concert after that.
One clarifying question on this. Is it our desire to have next board lead these like they did with the other ones, or?
I think we would be doing it.
Okay, that's fine.
Yep.
Yeah, that's not an issue, so just making sure.
And I know there were resources that next board could send to us.
I think
We
so.
can get it done.
Okay, cool. So I will update the work plan to reflect that Rob will facilitate that and Dwana and Deanna will.
Yeah,
facilitate.
you can say that Rob will be responsible for making sure that they happen, and just as
Right,
with the last ones, then I'll share the dates, or Tom will,
Whoever's
dates and
available,
times,
yep.
and then we'll seek volunteers for whoever's able to facilitate them,
Perfect.
knowing that we have capacity.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Awesome.
I got out on the last one, so I mean, I kind of owe you guys, don't I?
Thank you, Rob. And then the next work item I have is to add a preamble with the board's governance policies and
Board management delegation.
board doc. Yes, thank you. I'm like GP and BD. I don't know.
Those both.
Policies and board belief statements as a reminder to ourselves and the community. That did not show up on tonight's agenda, so Cindy and I will talk about.
Actually, that was my lame attempt in introducing this agenda item.
Oh, that was the new. Okay, I was like, this is more than Cindy normally says. Look at that.
So
thank you,
So
Madam
that
Chair.
was an attempt at starting that practice, and it seems like with our work plan would be a good place
to start talking about
to
that.
start talking
Yeah.
about that, or to bring something like that up. That was my.
Well,
and I know we didn't.
Yeah, and I
coordinate
know
that,
at our work session when we met with staff too, we had talked a little bit in one of our groups about potentially adding in relevant board beliefs or other things that related to different monitoring reports. And so for tonight, I know that we have specific board beliefs that would have related to our males of color. So that might be something that as a board we want to discuss, if that's something we'd like to continue to add in. So maybe the next time we have something like that, we might try, we could discuss that, Cindy, maybe at agenda planning?
Maybe, or that might be something to
ask-
add in
to
as
work at
we,
next
as
board,
we
yeah.
work through with next board, because
Mhm.
some of that stuff is going to be changing
It's going to
anyway, so
change.
rather than
Yeah.
adding something on to the old,
Okay. Okay.
that would be my thought on that.
Okay. And then Cindy and Terry on government, governance policy 1.8 edit.
I have those to pass out at work session, or I can pass them out now. Both
Okay.
this one are.
This one and 1.11.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have them right back here. And then they would be ready for, we can put those on the next agenda if we want.
Okay. Okay. And I apologize for not bringing copies of our equity policy. So coming up, hopefully by the 5th, we'll have a reading list and dates for completion and discussion for our 40X and what school boards do so that it can closely tie to our next board work. Is there any update on the City Council School Board joint meeting?
The only thing is that we have a planning meeting scheduled for the same day as the CLAT Day on the Hill, thank you, and might be reshuffling that to be able to attend CLAT Day on the Hill, and so we might be rescheduling that planning meeting, but as of now, there's no other updates.
Okay. The meeting's still set for March 27th at 5 p.m.
As of now, yes.
As of now, okay, perfect. And then upcoming, we just have additional policies and external monitoring that we'll be looking at before the end of April. I guess before I get too far into the future, are there any items that board members feel that we need to add into our workflow here within the next few weeks?
The next few weeks, no, I did hear Deanna say that we need to do anti-racism training, so if we want to add that, that's another capacity thing that we'll have to, it's a commitment we'll have to make because, which I'm fine with, and I don't know that we would put a date certain on it now, but I think add it to the list.
Yeah, and some of that too came out of a conversation that we had when we were talking about our equity policy, in that our staff and our superintendent are doing this types of training, and that to be working more parallel with our staff, particularly as it relates to next board, but other things too. Is
So
there
yeah,
anything
I
to
think
add to
at
that?
least
Yeah.
adding it for right now
Okay.
into the grid, and so we don't lose track of it, and then we can discuss more.
And I think it would probably be appropriate, but correct me if I'm wrong, that we have a professional, I know it's you and myself and Tom and Matt.
Oh,
the
Board
name of our-
Development
The Board Development Committee. I don't know if that's something that we could put on the Board Development Committee to discuss with Tom and Matt of where that might be appropriate to fit in
Yeah,
with some of
that
the other
sounds-
work that
that
we're doing.
sounds like a good idea. To me, unless anybody else wants to take that on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next items on the agenda are informational items for the board's review, preliminary plans for various school improvement projects, notification of award of competitive bids, and then number 3 is board governance budget update for GP 1.11. So that's been added and will appear quarterly in conjunction with the quarterly financial conditions and activities monitoring report. And that was part of our board request and the reason for editing that policy as well, to say that we're going to review it on a regular basis. And next, we have items of privilege. I have nothing to report at this time. Is there anything board members would like to share?
Yep, I didn't know if you wanted to share since you're going to be there for Day on the Hill.
I don't mind, sure. The Community Legislative Action Team has our Day on the Hill coming up next Wednesday, February the 27th. This is our 3rd or 4th annual Day on the Hill.
Something like that.
Third. This is our third annual Day on the Hill, and we really would love to encourage the community to come out and join us. We'll be meeting at East High School at 8 a.m. in the auditorium. We'll do a brief training there, so if you don't feel like, you feel uncomfortable or maybe haven't tried or done something like this before, we will not leave you hanging. We'll leave you, we'll train you so you feel like have what you need to be successful. That day we'll have a light breakfast. It should be a good time. We'll have students joining us. And so if you have some time between, and we'll also provide transportation. There will be a bus if you don't feel like driving or walking over or dealing with parking. So come join us Wednesday the 27th, East High Auditorium. We'll start at 8 and then we'll head over at 9 and we'll be there until 11, and we would love to have you join us.
Anybody else? Turn it over to Dr. Ahart for the superintendent's report.
Okay. In July of 2011, I became associate superintendent for teaching and learning, and I was introduced to the school board at City Hall because this room here was being renovated. And Thomas just started at that very same time, and he stole Thomas, so I got stuck with Tom. And so I've been working extremely closely with him since that time. So I guess I just want to offer my posthumous gratitude and thank you to Thomas for his friendship and his leadership. That's all I have.
Thank you. We'll adjourn the meeting and hold our work session in 5 minutes or so.